There has never been as many people playing video games as there are right now. Yet no game, no matter how large of a backing, is guaranteed an audience. Modern games walk a fine line between maintaining and losing their communities, and more than ever, we've seen games crumble under the pressure. In the age of live service, maintaining the numbers is everything. The reasons that games die or start to die are numerous and varied. Some happen long before the game even launches, and others happen long after. Some are massive controversies that break things wide open, others are small and build up over time. Almost everything leads downstream to money, as ultimately games are a business, and no players means no money, which means dead game. But how do games fail in that first step? Today, we're going to look at some of the ways that games fail to build and maintain a community. Look at some recent examples of such games, and maybe learn a thing or two about building our own communities. Since most games are made for the purpose of making money, I think it's worth starting here. Game budgets for your major tentpoles have increased by a factor of 10 every decade since the medium's inception. From hundreds of thousands in the 80s to hundreds of millions to even billions in the 2010s and 20s. In the age of modern gaming, these massive budgets have to be justified by proportional sales. You have to get that money back somehow, and as such, the way that games monetize has evolved with the medium over the years. From a single purchase to in-game microtransactions, to things like seasonal passes that drop on consistent schedules throughout the year. Working out the appropriate costs of a product to a consumer is known as the pricing strategy. How a game handles its pricing strategy is incredibly important, as live service games can have both upfront and ongoing methods of making money. You could go traditional and get players to buy the game upfront, which puts the onus on acquiring new players. Alternatively, you could allow free access but offer optional monetization like battle passes, which puts the onus on retaining players for long periods. Most games tend to do a combination of the two, and how they balance this has a significant impact on the reception by gamers. It's also an important factor in how games compete with their competitors. One game that I think really messed this up last year was the much maligned Concord. You could make 1,000 videos on why Concord failed. Some people have done exactly that, but a big thing I believe was the fact that it had an upfront cost of $40. In the modern gaming ecosystem, online only and free to play practically go hand in hand, and it's hard to name a prominent multiplayer franchise that doesn't allow free access in some way. Call of Duty does it, Halo Infinite does it, every battle royale pretty much does it, and every hero shooter does it. But Concord didn't. Free to play has its drawbacks, but something it does incredibly well is build up an initial community, as the price of entry is just the download. Not doing this in the modern free to play environment would be like if this video cost money to watch, and the videos around it didn't. Similar games have to compete for the same types of players, and making people pay for something that has freely available alternatives really works out well. It didn't even really matter if Concord was a fun game at that point. The price would prevent it from achieving a significant reception regardless. It would need to be the best game this side of the 20s to ever hope to outperform. You might be wondering then how Overwatch got away with pretty much the same thing in 2016. Well, because it was 2016. It did not have any competitors. Get out of here. So really, price is a significant risk for community building, but it doesn't just end at the front door. How a game handles its in-game microtransactions is important too. Games like 2019's Anthem and 2017's Star Wars Battlefront 2 were blasted for their hostile monetization practices that put money over core gameplay that ultimately alienated players and pushed them away. This does suggest, to some extent, that monetization plays a significant role in how welcoming a game is to new players, and the staying power it has for established players alike. It's an overarching system. Which is why, if you're looking to build your own community, for example, it's best not to gatekeep it behind a paywall, and instead encourage people to engage in low barrier to entry ways, for example, liking and subscribing. This allows them to make their own choice regarding support later, because no one really likes these things being shoved in their face every 5 minutes, and it's why there's always backlash whenever companies like YouTube or Twitch ramp up their advertising intensity. The freedom to choose is what matters. Talking about money is fun and all, but what about the game itself causes them to fail? Surely all it takes is to make a fun game, right? Well, yeah, but before that, the game actually has to work properly. Game development is a notoriously tough business, filled with looming deadlines and feature creep and crunch hours. Oftentimes we see games companies bite off more than they can chew. One of the worst offenders for this was No Man's Sky, which had a launch so poor that it single-handedly changed the mood around game development and annihilated trust in gameplay trailers and previews, in a way that I don't think the medium has recovered from since. Being able to trust a game and its developers is an important part of building and maintaining a community, as if you can't trust what a game promises, you can't really trust it to reliably deliver you new content in the future. It's in part why a game I talked about in my previous video, Velvet Remastered, has fallen off the face of the earth over 2024, as it's essentially become abandonware after the devs promised, and then never delivered on, updates. The same thing happened to Kerbal Space Program 2. Not too long after it launched into early access, the entire development team was gutted, leading to now what is just a completely dead, unfinished project, which you can buy now for the low price of $44.99. What a steal. It's also why the ever controversial mega project Star Citizen frequently finds itself in hot water. This year the game stability got so bad that they've decided to restructure their entire approach in 2025 and focus their efforts towards fixing long-standing bugs. On the flip side, it's also why games like the aforementioned No Man's Sky and Cyberpunk 2077 were able to claw their way out of catastrophic launches, because it turns out being consistent and routinely delivering on promises made is a great way to keep people around, and even attract new players who initially shun the release. These games, which used to struggle to maintain a playbase of a few thousand people, are now easily finding themselves in the top 50 most played games on Steam. But you don't need to revive a broken game in order to see an uptick in player counts. Games with super consistent update schedules like Warframe, Stellaris, a personal favourite of mine, even games like 2013's Grand Theft Auto 5 can continue to build communities years or even decades after their respective launches. Because in the modern gaming age, you don't need a new game to experience something new. So really, consistency is key. I know I might not exactly be the best example of that, but you know, coaches don't play, or whatever the saying is. The time frame isn't all that important. The important part is reliably sticking to that time frame, building trust with your community, and the knowledge that there's more to come in the near future. It's more than enough to keep people around. In-game community features are essential in building and maintaining a community in the long term. Or are they? Yeah. Friends lists, server browsers, user-generated content. It's the lifeblood of any multiplayer game. If making a good game brings the people, then it's stuff like this that keeps them around for years to come. Games like Rocket League have been able to endure significant content droughts simply by having a robust multiplayer suite that invites players back again and again. A game that still pulls in over 30,000 players on Steam, despite having spent about as much time off the Steam store as on it. I think it's why Halo Infinite has struggled so significantly compared to previous titles. It launched with too little, too late, and it shows up in how brutal its player drop-off is. What used to be one of the major FPS tentpoles is now struggling to put up even 4-digit player counts. A lot of it can be attributed to promises not kept, but we can't count out the lack of actual gameplay features at launch, specifically things like Forge and Co-op, which were mainstays of the series for a long time. Community engagement has almost become a lost art in the AAA space. Things like server browsers are few and far between, as players seemingly have less and less control over their multiplayer experiences. A lot of this can be chalked up to changes in how games monetize themselves. It's having more direct control over things like player matchmaking, gives developers more agency over events and seasonal content like battle passes. Modern games are also a lot more algorithmically driven, as optimizing player engagement takes a lot of the guesswork out of player retention. But is something important lost along the way? It's why I think that if you're going to run a community of your own, it's important to give your members as much agency as you can reasonably give them, providing them spaces where they can be authentic, make new friends, and just exist online. It's why a community of just a few active members can stay active seemingly in perpetuity, even in the face of 0 new members. In a lot of ways, how active a community is more important than the apparent scale. Gaming as a whole is in a really interesting place right now. What used to feel like guaranteed successes are no longer guaranteed. Trust in companies is near an all-time low, and buying a full-price game is an extremely hard sell for a lot of people. We've even seen major companies like Ubisoft and Microsoft buckle under the pressure to perform. Whether that pressure is self-inflicted is a topic for another time, but regardless, the industry landscape has been tough, and we routinely see layoffs after layoffs happen across the world. Really, it can feel like the road to genuine success is a pretty straightforward one, but both in games and out of them, it's often significantly more complicated. What makes a successful game? What makes a good YouTube video? It's not always clear cut, and sometimes what works in one instance can fail massively in another. But if there's one thing that has always been true, since the dawn of creative media itself, is that if you make good stuff, the people will follow. Do you think I make good stuff? Maybe so if you've made it to the end here. Either that, or I'm just on a side monitor while you're grinding away at some game you played for hundreds of hours. In any case, consider becoming a channel member. Members get access to behind the scenes work, early access to scheduled videos, and priority comment responses. I'll talk to you about pretty much anything.